How are you?
How are you?
Good. You know what? Before I forget, I printed out a copy of the master plan.
Oh, thank you. That'd be great. Hello, how are you?
These started warming up a little bit yesterday or today.
Sunshine helps, that's for sure.
Hey Josh, how you doing?
Hey, Dave. All right.
Thank you very much. No turning these off?
What's that?
No turning these off.
If you hold the button down, then it's off. As soon as you let go, it's on again.
Well, that doesn't help.
You just lean it back here.
See, that's why I don't touch stuff.
You just lose.
Thank you. Uh-oh.
Josh, it doesn't say it on the agenda, but are we voting on the rules or is it information purposes only?
The bylaws you were given at the last meeting, so if you have comments on them, bring them in. And I think Ben might talk a little bit about it. I guess you're welcome to vote on them if they're
No, I
simple.
just didn't know if, because it wasn't
Yeah.
mentioned on the agenda, I didn't know if we're supposed to be voting.
My guess would be no. Ben's just gonna provide a draft or something,
Mhm.
but
Do you have a Wi-Fi password?
have you heard from Dave DeCoster or Robert?
Dr. Bruin, he emailed back that he was coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, I think Dave DeCoster did too. Aaron called me, he's on his way, he says it's gonna be like real close if he gets here on time.
Traffic's a little heavier today.
Yeah, and he said if he's not here by 6:30, that to have Dave DeCoster just chair the meeting and start it.
Mhm.
But he said he's been trying to call Dave DeCoster and he's not answering his phone, so
Oh,
we're just trying to confirm that he's coming.
I'd known he lives in my subdivision or adjacent to my subdivision, I could have checked.
Oh, does he?
He lives on the north side of Haverhill, or on the south side of Haverhill. Back when Aaron used to deliver the packets, one time I delivered it for him. That's how I know exactly where his house is.
Wi-Fi password?
Thing for me. Which ones do you have a password for the guest one or no?
No.
I think I have it written down in my office.
Okay. Oh, technology. glad you're here. Don't hear that very often, do you?
No, I hardly ever hear that. I certainly don't hear that when I get home. Although I did get home and catch her cutting the grass, so
Dang.
worst thing in the world to come home to. Not the best either.
Gotta do that tomorrow. I'm letting it dry out.
Oh, it's rough.
It's a little moist.
And it's not that, just that. It's a jungle.
Well, I did mine last Thursday.
So did I, but
Really?
oh, I got to cut my grass easily twice a week this time of year. You must not fertilize.
I do. At the clay.
hesitation in your answer was
The clay.
enough for me. That you didn't fertilize yet.
Twice.
Whoa, egg on my face.
And I will be in tomorrow, just so that you. I know it's a rare occasion.
When my allergist recommended that I cut grass,
Yeah.
that I should pay somebody to do it,
Oh, yeah, that's
Yeah,
like a
exactly.
doctor's note. Yeah, yeah. I got you like Vinnie Barbarino. I got a note from home.
Sweetheart, I can't.
The funny thing is, I was watching somebody walking their dog today, and the dog was and
Thank
the
you.
dog was
Okay.
splashing
Yeah.
on the back corner of the property, because my neighbor's property is real low.
Yeah.
And I call it Lake Tilch. He gets, anytime it rains, he's got a lake there on his property.
So all these rules that were in the packet, are we gonna have action on them today, or?
I already asked the question to Josh. He said, the short answer is no, it's information purposes, that they took our recommendations from last month
I
and they
gotcha.
gave us a new draft.
I read
So I was
through them.
looking at it first and like, wow, what are all these lines through here?
Right, I read through them, but I didn't know if there was gonna be, there was nothing on the agenda for action. What do you say, man?
What's going on?
So you're, when are you guys going over to Fraser, huh?
I was gonna ask you the same thing.
Well, it was between him,
Is that your old boss?
yeah,
That's what I
between
heard.
him and my other director,
Yeah.
so when Ragsdale said
How's it
to
going?
the
What's up?
director, he said,
Living life.
In case I don't get to talk to Aaron before the meeting, just tell him to use the.
okay, instead of the middle, I got you.
He's on his way.
All right.
Rags called.
Yeah.
You know, 45 people put in for the
Trying to get started that many?
because I guess it was on FM. Anyway,
loud.
he said, that's between you and this guy from Oak Park. I just want you guys in to.
Yeah.
Let's see, Jeff said. Tell you what, I'll make it easy for you. Just take my name out then.
Really?
You know,
You probably don't know.
I don't know.
Oh, you don't know?
Who?
Mark
Ragsdale?
Ragsdale.
Oh, yeah, I know him. Yeah, I cooperate with him pretty
Yeah,
well.
that's what,
We cooperate.
that's what I figured.
Yeah.
So was it your old boss?
Yes. Yeah, actually, not only was my boss, he's my partner for many years. We worked on the factory
Do you have
together.
anything for the bylaws?
I mean, we've been working in the same truck for 25 years. him and I.
When Rob told me that, because he
Go
told
through
me,
this?
I think it's a guy from.
No, I made
Bozeman."
much
I'm like,
edits.
"What?" Like, 'cause I thought it was you at first. He goes, no, it's been there like 38 years. I'm like, well, that's not that guy.
Yeah.
So I figured it was the guy.
Because Ragsdale called me that
Yeah.
day, and Jeff told me. And I said, no, you didn't. You got a lot of good candidates. What do you mean? Oh, I don't know, man. I said, I'm sure your other candidate has 38 years, Mark. Don't worry. And not to mention,
From the,
when Jeff was doing his interview, they had a water main break going on.
surprisingly, this time,
It's because I got
on the
some.
agenda side in the
I
front.
get there, they got a grading bucket on the backhoe. They've already ripped the water service off of the water main on a precinct. They've already dug. They've already fixed it. They're refixing it. And Jeff says to
Hi,
me,
Aaron.
Oh, it's Rich Andrew. I didn't recognize
Good,
the
all right.
background
Yeah.
there.
Well, sounds like you
Where's your
supervised
picture you
it.
posted? I didn't recognize the
Yeah, it
background.
was in the exercise room.
Called you? Yeah, that's it.
he goes, hey, what's up? About 15 minutes, I had a vector over there.
I'm actually not that familiar with the rec
It's in the
center,
main
so.
office. He said, go on there with your
Been in
sleeve
that
on,
room
cut it
before.
out. Quit messing around. Hey, you think I
You allow it.
His, you get the long wire.
Yeah,
We've
yeah.
got.
Yeah,
it's a
works
high
for me.
excavation.
Oh,
Is that the right
For
pronunciation,
doing,
or is it?
Depends on who you ask.
It's like that Allergen service line.
That's
fine. Gamikia, Gamisha,
I had a, we got a DWA.
any of the above.
For the sign verification.
Yes.
Yeah.
Originally, my grand, I had
Say, I
a
know it
truck.
is.
Yeah.
they came back and said, well, you know, we only paid
Alright.
for, I think they paid for 25%.
When did you put
Or
that?
100.
I think we're gonna tack it on to
Eight Mile and Mountain.
Clean Water.
How long ago?
Well, we ended up taking it out, I just put in money.
Made it faster than I did.
We're
hustled.
doing it.
I didn't think
I think we're sure getting it done for $50
Yeah.
for
Josh said,
doing
like,
it.
wait,
I don't know.
I have to check, cause I got a price from DVM
Yeah.
last year, and we've had some issues.
DVM's doing Fraser.
Are they really?
I think they were, I wanna say they were around
Okay.
500 per, but.
That's what I did, I proposed about 500, but I did my estimate.
Yeah, he should be
And I
taking.
threw a little bit extra money in this year, cause I just don't.
comfortable with our routine?
We can do it for close to that much.
No, we haven't talked much.
But
Well, they did
No, I'm
give us
writing
a-
it's the manpower, it's where.
That's what, yeah, what else you not doing, you know?
Yes, what else are you not doing?
Just make sure that if you ever have
Well,
something that you
the
want to
guy I know,
mention,
Rob, he was actually my boss when I first started it,
Okay.
and like 5-6 years ago when I went
keep
over.
someone from talking unless, like you said,
It's not into effect yet though for 30 days.
He's good, he'll be good. It just sounds
Tell
like
him if he
they,
needs
want it
anything
bigger.
from Roseville,
Yeah.
give me a call.
I'll, Yeah.
They offered it to him, I would have it.
pretty sure, yeah, cause he was the last one. It was, I think it was like 2 months.
Yes.
I'm,
And who's
I don't-
retiring from?
yeah, I don't think it's at 20.
Sure,
Yeah, I'm Jeff, took the job. Does he live up there?
St. John's Marsh.
Oh, it's better for him anyway.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll help you guys out.
Yeah,
Get each other in.
oh, they said to let you know.
not that one. It's probably not much back up yet. Up really loud.
Hi, Ben. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Very good, thank you.
Good.
I was getting a little worried, it's like, no way. I mean, like, why would he leave right now?
Yeah, I'm not going anywhere unless they throw me out.
All right, we ready?
Mhm.
Pronunciation, you actually of all people, you probably.
Mikia? Jimbo, we're just gonna call him Jimbo.
Jimbo.
You ready, Josh?
Yeah.
Ready, Ben? All right. You ready, Ed? Alrighty. Good evening, everyone. My name is Aaron Tuckfield. I'm the chairperson of the Macomb Township Zoning Board of Appeals. Today is Thursday, May the 4th. The time is 6:30 PM, and I am calling this regularly scheduled meeting of our board to order. That is the first order of business. The second order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you could stand with me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, very good. Item 3 is roll call. Mr. DeBruin, could you call the roll?
David DeCoster,
Here.
Robert DeBruin here, David Piper,
Here.
Jim Gamikia.
Here.
We have one alternate member today.
And then I'm also present,
Oh.
and that gives us, gives us 5 members here. All right, just noted that we do have one alternate member this evening, but we need 3 regular members for quorum, which we do have. All right, that moves us on to item 4, which is addressing any conflicts of interest. At this time, we ask the members to note if they have any conflicts on any items. We do this by calling the roll, and if any member or alternate has a conflict on any item, please signify by saying yes. If you do not, by saying no. If there are any conflicts identified, we would then have that member not take part in that item. Again, we would do this by calling the roll, and saying yes would mean you have a conflict of interest, and saying no means you do not. Mr. DeBruin, please call the roll.
David DeCoster,
No.
Robert DeBruin, no. David Piper,
No.
Jim Gamikia,
No.
Aaron Tuckfield.
No. All right, having stated no conflicts of interest, we're going to move on to item 5, which is the approval of tonight's agenda. Is there any discussion or motion on tonight's agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I'd make the motion to accept the agenda as presented.
Motion by Mr. Piper, is there support?
Support.
Supported by Mr. Gamikia. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by saying nay. That motion carries. Item 6 is the approval of the previous meeting minutes. That would be for March the 2nd, 2023. I believe we didn't have an April meeting, so that would be for 2 months ago. I know that I have something for these, but does anybody else have any comments or changes for the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I just noticed one correction of the absent member.
Yes,
That should indicate should be Mr. DeBruin.
yes, I believe that would be Mr. De Bruin, and I think it's noted a few times through here, and Josh, I should have written down some areas, but there's a couple areas where Mr. De Bruin is mentioned or Mr. DeCoster is mentioned as absent, so if we could have those fixed, and my apologies for not having gotten those to you over the weekend when I saw them. Is there any other comments or amendments for the minutes? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion on the amended minutes properly reflecting Mr. De Bruin absent and Mr. DeCoster present.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the minutes of the March meeting as amended.
Motion by Mr. Gamika, is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. DeCoster. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by saying nay. That motion passes. Okay, that moves us on to old business, which I believe are the ZBA bylaws. We can discuss them this evening. Did we want to go over these without Mr. Mazzara here? I know we have talked about that before. I'm good either way, but I don't know your thoughts on this, either Josh or Ben.
I don't have any concerns with moving forward without Mr. Mazzara.
Okay. Ben, I suspect most of these changes are from your office. Is this something that you'd like to talk to us about, or see if we have any comments? How would you like to proceed on this item?
Sure, so, this is the first time we've really taken a deep dive into the bylaws, and what we did was, really conform these bylaws with, similar provisions that we have in the Planning Commission bylaws relative to the Open Meetings Act and other details. Certainly, I would be open to any comments that we had. I added in and made the changes that were suggested in the last meeting as well. So, that's really it. I mean, I think that this is really, I think it spruces these up quite a bit and adds detail where I think it was lacking before. And also conforms them to things like we said, posting, the Open Meetings Act, things notice and whatnot, that are in the Planning Commission bylaws, which are in conformity with the statute. So, I took a look at the Open Meetings Act, I took a look at the Zoning Enabling Act as it pertains to ZBAs, and I made sure that the important points of the statute, of each of these statutes, are included in these rules.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Loya. Any questions from the board to either Mr. Loya or Mr. Box, or comments in general?
I don't have any major changes. I just have a couple of text revisions. Is it something we should submit?
Okay?
Or do you want me to say them now, or?
Yeah, that's fine.
The page numbers are a little bit incorrect. It says up to page 5, but I think it actually goes to 7.
Oh, we have page
Good
7
point.
and 5.
What's that?
Good point.
And then I think on,
7 of 5 does not make sense.
Yeah. like under section 2.2, and this is maybe a little overindulging here, but the letter A for the first tab is a lowercase a, but when you get to section 4, the tab is different, it's a capital A for each section.
Very good point.
And then there's a number 9 under opening of public hearing, and there's nothing listed. I think it just might have been an enter.
In which section is that?
3.4, public hearings, at the very end.
Oh, it comes up on the next page.
Yeah.
Very good.
And then, yeah. And I think that's all I had.
I was typing these fast and furiously, so I appreciate those.
But they do look very good, and I think they're much more detailed, so thank you.
Thank you, and I'll eliminate this, it looks, when you accept the changes, a lot of these will, like, for instance, the open space on some of these pages, that goes back if,
Yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Loya or Mr. Box? I had a couple of comments and a question. I think I'll go with a question first. I just left the section. Section 3.8, Rules of Order. We put in Robert's rules a little bit stronger than we have in the past. I just wanted to understand your thoughts on how we would treat this. So in the past, I think what I've been told is generally Robert's rules, but basically run the meeting effectively. I'll paraphrase.
Yes.
This is, as I read it, basically Robert's rules unless it conflicts with something that would provide due process. Is that an accurate reading of it? And I don't have a
No.
problem with it, I just wanna make sure that that is what you were intending when you
No,
wrote
I
it.
don't read it that way at all. It says that you shall follow Robert's Rules of Order. However, the chair may deviate from strictly following rules of order on a particular item if you deem it appropriate to promote and provide due process. So if you feel like the flow of the meeting is appropriate to make, you can allow people to speak at certain times, things of that nature, it relaxes that. If you don't want that in there, that's fine, we can go back to the former language. This is the language that's in the PC rules.
Okay.
So that is totally up to you. So I added that as a option to conform with the PC rules, but again, this is your ultimate decision.
And I would just say, I don't have a problem with it. I will say that I generally know Robert's rules, as I think most of us generally know them. I think I would probably feel a little bit more compelled to know them better if this is put in there, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Although I will have to say that I purchased the latest version of Robert's Rules, and it was a somewhat thicker book than I was anticipating when it arrived in the mail.
And there are Cliff Note versions of that, because not all of Robert's Rules applies
Applies
to
to
these
us.
types of meetings.
Yes.
And again, we use it in a limited application.
Hmm.
We have very limited types of motions and procedures versus the vast world of motion.
Of potential motions and different, yes,
That's
okay.
correct.
I don't have a problem with it, I just wanted to make sure I understood it. Understood what you were meaning that to imply.
I certainly, and again, if you wanted to end at, if the chair deems appropriate, period, you're happy, if we feel like it's for the best interest of the meeting, that's up to the board. So that gives the chair flexibility to flex out of that.
I guess I'm of two minds, and I would hand this back to you, what you think would be most appropriate, in the frame of mind, similar to our last workshop meeting, that we wanna make sure that we are providing a good record. I don't know if this affects that. If
My-
it doesn't affect that, and it's just a matter of preference and organization, then,
So the benefit of following Robert's Rules of Order is that it provides uniformity in the meeting.
Hmm.
And the reason why that provision is there is to promote and provide proper due process.
Hmm.
I think that actually protects the township, because if we do deviate, you have the discretion as the chair in order to provide maybe a little bit more parts of the record or something, which is, the intent is to provide better due process for the applicants.
Okay.
Right?
I'm comfortable with that then.
Okay.
I will say that I am probably gonna spend a little bit more time to make sure that I'm more familiar with it. Obviously, like you say, there's significant amounts of it that are not pertinent, but.
Just be familiar with it and do your best.
Okay. And then a couple of other notes that I appreciated. One, I think we were a little bit more descriptive on removing a member for the three feasances, which is good. We've now had to do that within the past 10 years, and there was a lot of uncertainty on how to do that, so I was appreciative that that was spelled out. And then I would also note for the board that this also mimics the planning commission, in that the planning commission, we have excused and unexcused absences. And multiple unexcused absences can be grounds for removal. However, the way we've done it with the planning commission is generally, as long as you give anybody a heads up, it's an excused absence. It's usually reserved for somebody who is like deliberately being, avoiding meetings and not showing up. It just makes it a little bit easier to document that and say, hey, this was 3 unexcused absences in a row, and on we go. So I appreciate that, and like you mentioned, I think that's good uniformity between the ZBA and the planning commission. Any other comments from anyone? Are you looking for us to adopt these this evening, Josh? You think would that be the appropriate if we were comfortable with?
If you're comfortable with them, I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, and one thing I should mention to the board as a whole is, we generally look at these on a yearly basis, but if we decide at any point during the year that we feel that they're not appropriate in some ways, we can literally bring them back up and edit them at any time. I don't believe there's any public notification rulings or anything else of that nature, so.
It's very true. I mean, we'll fix these typos if through the process and there's another review, we find something problematic, we can bring it up in a meeting and move to amend them as such.
Mr. DeCoster, would you be comfortable if you voted on this, contingent on fixing some of the issues, or would you prefer to see that back?
No, I'm perfectly fine with it.
Okay. Well, with that being said then, unless anyone has any other discussion, I'm gonna bring this back, to the board for comments or motions.
I would make a motion to approve based on the, with the additions that we mentioned here.
Motion by Mr. De Bruin to approve the proposed bylaw amendments, contingent upon the changes suggested by Mr. DeCoster being made. Is there support?
I will support that.
Supported by Mr. Piper. All those in, actually, let's do a roll call on this one, Mr. Bruin.
David DeCoster,
Yes.
Robert DeBruin, yes. David Piper,
Yes.
Jim Gamikia,
Yes.
Aaron Tuckfield.
Yes. All right, that item passed and the bylaws are amended. I appreciate all your work on that, gentlemen.
Anytime.
Thank you.
All right, moves us on to item 8, which is new business. We appreciate everybody staying patient through some of the housekeeping there. First item is multiple requests for variances. That would be sections 10.0311 EF2 and sections 10.0356A2. This is for permanent parcel 0826151234. Chris Serhan, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, is the petitioner, and the nominal street address is 48139 Primrose Drive. Mr. Box, could you walk us through the department reviews, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the request here is for a variance for the rear yard setback. The setback requirement is 20 feet. What they are seeking is to build a patio that would only be 12 and a half feet from the rear property line. Therefore, they would need the variance to do so. Their plot plan, as you see here, they do have some utility easements, but that does not impact the 20-foot setback. The proposed patio is not encumbered by an easement in that sense. Staff did review this request. Engineering noted that it did not appear that the existing easements interfere with the improvements within the buildable area, but there are no engineering concerns. The planning staff had the same comment that there's not really an impact from the easements to necessitate a hardship or a difficulty. The physical characteristics associated with the property, it's pretty rectangular in shape. It's not an odd-shaped property, and we would defer to the applicant to demonstrate whether other designs have been explored. But from a zoning perspective, public safety would not be a concern or would not be impacted should this be granted. Public Works had no objections to the request as long as they do not enter the storm sewer easement, which again, they're not showing that they would. So being that it doesn't follow the ordinance, obviously we cannot support it, but we would defer to the applicant if they can identify a hardship that would necessitate this variance.
All right, thank you, Mr. Box. Is there any questions for Mr. Box from the board?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Mr. Gamikia.
just one clarification. There's two different addresses in here. Can you verify? I see 48135, 48139. Just maybe for the record,
Oh,
which
that was
one is correct?
Probably a typo.
48139
39.
Primrose is the correct address.
9 is the correct address? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Looks like we have the same parcel ID on both the application and the main portion. We probably should verify the parcel ID is correct, just because if we make a motion, we should have it for the
I can do that right now.
parcel ID code.
Thank you for catching that.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I'm gonna take it out to the applicant, and it looks like you have multiple people here. If you could identify yourselves for the record, name and address.
Yes, sir. This is Phil Brumley with Brumco Building, LLC. We're out of Casco Township, 4343 County Line Road. I'm here with Chris Serhan, the property owner, and his lovely daughter, Emma. I'm here to basically answer any questions you guys may have. I'll let Chris speak to the hardship on the property. Just another note here. This would be the fourth porch that we have built in this subdivision because of the heat-related sun conditions that exist out there. There's nowhere to get out of the sun outside. So, just as a note that this is the fourth one that we've been building. I'm pretty sure that the township is pretty happy with what we've done so far in there with those homes. But Chris, I'll let you speak.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Chris Serhan, I'm the property owner, and like I said, I brought my daughter along with me as representative for my wife and my other daughter who couldn't make it with us. So, as Phil said, what we're looking to do is we're looking for approval for our patio structure in order to erect this concrete patio with a covered rooftop to help with a lot of the issues that we're having with the sun in the neighborhood. So my home faces east and west, and we get the back of the house facing west, and we get that immense sunlight coming down constantly. So our existing patio is being, heavily damaged from that sunlight. We have a really hard time in, utilizing our yard and enjoying time out there because of how much heat we're getting. And we've tried multiple different umbrella, structures that have been blown over by the wind. We get a lot of wind through because we have the drainage basin, the pond, so we get the wind tunnel coming through from the golf course across through all the yards there. So that's creating a lot of difficulty. So we've gone through, multiple umbrellas, which have caused issues getting ripped out by the wind, just not really providing any coverage that would be usable. We've installed a retractable Mary Grove awning also to help with that. And, it's very nice, but it only covers 16 feet and doesn't come out very far. And when it's too windy, it can't be utilized, so it gets brought in because of the safety issue, right? We're looking to build this in order to make it to where it would be really usable and feasible to give us, the same enjoyments that others in the neighborhood are getting. This is the structure that we've came up with, and we've also explored doing a pool. And because of the easements, we couldn't do a pool. So after we looked at the easements from each side and the restrictions on that, we're looking at a 10-foot pool. So what good is that? It's not safe. It's not enjoyable. With our current patio, we worked with the township in order to make it so that we could fit it in with the easement as well in the setback, and we separated part of it. We worked with Michael in the building township there to be able to separate it. And really what it's coming down to is we've got multiple other people in the neighborhood that are able to do different things with their yards, but because of the easements and the setbacks, we've been really restricted heavily. And we view it as a hardship. We paid a premium to be on this lot on a beautiful pond, and we really can't do anything. Let's see. Another issue, with the patio, with the heat, is it gets very hot. Stamped concrete patio. We've got multiple kids trying to walk around on it, enjoy it, and it's burning hot, burning their feet, and we can't. What can we do, right? So, let's see. Township. Another situation that we're dealing with is, I have a very difficult skin condition called polymorphous light eruption, which is, if you ever heard of sun poisoning, you get extreme heat on your skin and it causes very serious rashes. So that's something I've been dealing with for the last few years. I have doctor documentation from that, and this has also been another, hardship that I've dealt with. It's like, we need to do something back here to cover this patio. So we proposed multiple different designs and different structures, and this is what we came up with. We're just looking for one section of it to be, if you see up there, there's the 16-foot section, to be approved based on the current ordinance. And everything else complies with the township that we have. So, what do you think? Am I missing anything?
Can I
Yeah.
I'd like to add just one thing. It's been my understanding that rear yard setbacks are designed and are in place for a neighbor that's directly across from you in the rear. Mr. Serhan does not have that. He has a retention pond, so there really isn't anybody in front or to the rear of him. It's just completely open, and just wanted to make a notation of that, so you're not thinking that there's another house right there.
Yeah, we're wide open in the rear with the pond back there. So You know, the other, I guess, interesting thing about this whole experience, you know, being we tried to do a pool and we've looked at multiple different things is, you know, when you install an in-ground pool, you've got to be 10 feet from your house and 6 feet from the rear of your property line. So there's a 20-foot setback to do a covered structure, but you can install an in-ground pool with only a 6-foot setback from the rear. So, you know, looking at that, we're not infringing on any easements. We're not blocking anybody. We're not causing any other people in the neighborhood any issues with what we're trying to erect. We're just trying to be able to have, I guess, the same enjoyments and the same abilities to do things in our backyard that the other people in the township are able to do. So, yeah.
So just one more little thing I'm thinking as we're talking here. The 3 porches that we've purchased or that we've put in over here in this subdivision, none of them required any a ZBA variance. They just, you know, they had the space and they didn't have the easement running through them, coincidentally. And so, but Chris happens to have that going on in front and back, like we've talked, and so it does come with some, makes it difficult to try to create something back there and get his children out of the sun, where they can enjoy the back of the home.
Thank you. With that being said, you know, we appreciate the time, and, you know, we would hope that you guys can see how, you know, this would be something that would give us the same rights and the same opportunities that the other neighbors have had. And we are restricted here, and hopefully you can see how this this will be beneficial and appreciated. So thank you for your time. Do you have any questions or any concerns?
We might have some questions, but I appreciate you giving your description, and
Yeah.
I'll ask if we do. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. I think I might have spelled your name wrong when I wrote it down, Serhan. I thought I left
You got it
an
right,
R in
Serhan.
my notes. Mr. Serhan or Mr. Brumley from the board? Mr. Piper?
I'm just curious, the importance of that little extra space.
Yeah.
Why it's not just a perfect rectangle, what's the importance of that you need that variance?
Can I speak to that?
Yeah, definitely. I'll let Phil take, and then I'll add comments.
Again, his backyard is open to the retention pond, which if you have somebody behind you, there's relief at some point of the day where the sun goes down and it's not, the front of the house, a person to his rear is now blocking the sun and it's not beating up that back end. He has sun all day long, right till the sun sets. And this again is one of the problems. Why we were bumped out, in answer to your question, in that area is because the sun is so intense and that's why the fireplace is there to deflect that area so he can have somewhat of a protected area. The other part over here on the right side, he's gonna get little protection, you know, because it's so open. But it will keep the sun off of the pavement. It'll offer him a little bit more coverage where the sun is going to, at some point, crest on the building itself, the structure itself, and give him a little bit more of a break.
No, I can attest to that, because where I live, there's an empty field almost between my house and the house on the next street, because it doesn't back to back. So the sun does beat down on my patio as well, so.
Mr. Box, I had a quick question for you. I know on a residential house, we have a carve-out for door wall bays that do not count, I believe, to the rear setback, or we can project 2 feet into the rear setback. That's where we typically see a, 18 to 24 inch cantilevered bay. Would that be applicable in this case? If something was not on the ground but was cantilevered off the back of this patio 2 feet, would that not affect, or would that be?
I think the provisions in the ordinance that allow projections into, whether it be the front yard, side yard, or rear yard, are with reference to the principal structure, not a covered patio.
Thinking about the debates we've had on accessory structures versus principal structure, that we wouldn't count this as part of the principal for that perspective?
I don't believe so.
Okay. And I guess I would follow up to Mr. Brumley. Did you have something, Ben? I thought I heard you.
Not at this time, I may, but go ahead.
Okay. I had to follow up the similar question, I guess, to Mr. Piper's question. Obviously, if the L-shaped portion on the left side was not there, if the patio was a rectangle, it would fit within the ordinance or within, I'll say, a half a foot, and it looked like by the measurements, maybe it was 6 inches over, it'd have to be pared back. And even in, I think Mr. Brumley's, sample picture, which he was good enough to provide, which, by the way, it does look like a very nice construction. I appreciate the quality that's being put into it. It looks like a straight rectangle. Obviously, there are methods to provide sunshades on the back of a porch, perhaps besides a fireplace. What other considerations were there made for other ways to shade the sun? And if I'm understanding it right, so just briefly, this board's responsibility is to look for a practical difficulty. And I will get in trouble if I try to define it for us, because I'm not a lawyer, but it is our job to look for one. And a practical difficulty typically happens something with the land that you have to do something different because of. And what I'm hearing is that you're saying that because of the orientation of your house, the sun is difficult in the back. And so you are providing this to, and you mentioned some of your health concerns and whatnot.
Yeah.
So part of our job is to understand why you would not be able to build within the confines of the ordinance to address that and meet that standard. So this is why Mr. Piper is asking this question, and I'm also asking the question, could you not achieve that same standard and block out the sun without projecting into that rear yard setback? And to us, that's one of the key questions. It's can you not use your parcel in that way without violating the ordinance? And that's kind of the distinction we want to look at. So I guess I kind of hand it back to you guys. Is there something that forces you to put that in where you could not build that in some other way to protect your recreational, exterior recreational from the sun?
Can I speak to that?
Yeah.
Okay, so if he were not to do the bump out that we have there, and then he would have to rely heavily on retractable screens. Retractable screens do work to some degree, but again, they also are challenged by the wind as well. And then there are certain types of screens that are going to allow him some visibility, but then the more visibility he has with the screen, the more sun comes in. The more denser the screen, the less visibility. So when we were designing this thing, we were trying to find something that looked attractive, something that didn't. We've built a number, like I said, a number of these in the subdivision already. They haven't had the same problems that Chris has, which is he's completely exposed. Most of these houses all have a house to the rear of them, and it's deflecting the sun. And so they don't have the challenges that Chris has when it comes to sitting out on his patio. There's just nowhere to hide. Even if you did the screens, they are somewhat claustrophobic. They just are right in your face and closing you in inside the patio. So the little bump out was to not encroach on the easement, but give him a little bit more space. And the fact that he wasn't able to do a pool there for his children, that this was just a way to try to get a little bit more floor, a little more surface area without really asking for much.
Understood. Any other questions from the board?
Just as a clarification, Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead,
I
Mr.
don't think we're not saying that you could put a block wall or screens or whatever you needed, a half wall, but just doing it in a rectangular space as opposed to an L-shaped. You would still gain that screening from the sun. You could, however you wanted to do it. It was just not to encroach on that rear yard setback. That was just my thought.
So I see the point, with building a block wall, right? Like you're saying, you could put a wall up right there, and is that what we're going for in the township? I guess is what a big thing was with the design too, is like, we want to build something that's aesthetically pleasing to the township and pleasing to the neighborhood, while also providing this extra coverage that we could get. Because when we just do the rectangle, it becomes a shed roof, and it doesn't provide the same coverage that we get. We just get a solid shed. We don't get that raised gable that breaks that sun, and then also with the fireplace area breaking up the light that's coming in. But to your point, Jim, I see what you could build a brick wall, but I mean, we'd have brick walls all over the township, and probably wouldn't look aesthetically, like we would try to bring that, element to the neighborhood was a thought behind it, so.
Actually, Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Mr. Piper.
if I remember correctly, we can't have a wall like that,
That-
an open structure
I
in
was
the back.
just using it as a.
That's correct.
That's our
I
ordinance.
was just gonna weigh in on that, the way the ordinance is currently written, though we're likely gonna revise that, in the near future, the way it's currently written, he cannot build a wall there because it would be considered no longer an open air structure, it would be partially enclosed.
What happens if he builds and essentially, this is part of his content here, is that he wants to build a chimney, which obviously is it's not inherently a wall, but it is virtually a wall that would, I would assume, close up, and I think I saw it on the drawings here, some substantial width of that back L. Trying to remember, we talked about this in a case last year.
So the one that we talked about last year had a half wall included with the fireplace. It appears this one does not. And to this point, I believe, our inspectors and code enforcement have not viewed this as an enclosed structure or partially enclosed.
Okay. Although they could, to Mr. Migia's point, put the fireplace on the back of a horizontal, it would not count as a wall in that case.
Correct.
And could potentially fit the same type of thing. All right, go ahead, Mr. Roy.
Just a clarification point. Is the entire rear yard 33 feet? Is that the depth?
I think it's 35 and
35 point something, right here. Right there, 35 point.
35 and I think about a half. And now this, also too, this footprint is the same footprint we have out there now, with just the separation between the main patio structure and another port area for the fire pit. So we're trying to keep within that same structure that we worked with the township for in, 2014, when we first built the home.
Correct, with regards to its flat work currently.
Correct, with
There's
the
no-
flat
there's
work,
no
yeah.
vertical.
Yep, yep.
Okay. I think I should probably take this out to the public unless anybody else has any comments or further questions. And with that, I will open it up to the public. If there is anyone who wishes to speak on this request, I think we're gonna have to share microphones tonight, but if you do, please come forward to this microphone, state your name and address for the record, and give any comments you might have. I believe the only other audience we have tonight is our second applicant, so if you wish to speak, you can, but if not, without any objection, then I will close the public portion and bring it back to the board for any other questions, comments, or motions.
If there are no questions or comments, I'll make a motion. Unfortunately, my motion will be to deny variance under section 10.0311E F2. And that's regarding the rear setback from the rear property line. And that's because I just could not see the practical difficulty.
Support. Motion by Mr. DeCoster, support by Mr. DeBrew, and I do have a quick point of discussion on this. Mr. Box, we have two separate, and maybe Mr. Loy, we have two separate sections where we have cited in our agenda. I think it's referring to the same thing. Granted, it might be different with a denial than an approval motion, but do we have to do two separate motions or cite both sections?
I think you should cite both sections.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that being said, I'll amend my motion to deny variance section 10.0311E F2 and deny variance section 10.0356A2 on the grounds that I could not find a practical difficulty.
All right, Mr. DeBruin, are you still supporting that? Okay, with that, is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, Mr. DeBruin, please call the roll.
David DeCoster,
Yes.
Robert DeBruin, yes. David Piper,
Yes.
Jim Gamikia,
Yes.
Aaron Tuckfield.
Yes. All right, that motion passed and the variance was denied.
Can I ask one question before you guys close this out entirely?
You can briefly. I will
Briefly,
s-
just
I-
briefly.
I will say the order of it. we
I
did
would
close.
like, perhaps, if you're gonna deny it, to define your rear yard setbacks and why you actually have them in place in the first place. It's my understanding that those are there for
So,
houses that are to the rear.
Yeah.
So if you don't have a house to the rear, Is that the site, is that what you're citing, or what?
So in our case, the ZBA's job, we are an appeals board, we do not set the ordinance. There
Okay.
is other bodies for that do that. Our job is to look at the ordinance and determine if the request pertains to it. And if there is a difficulty that causes someone from being able to use their parcel in the way the ordinance views. Certainly, there can be questions as to the ordinance itself, but those are addressed elsewhere, and it's not the purview of this board to decide which of the ordinances is appropriate and which is not.
He can address that with the planning department
Correct.
and the engineering department.
And I understand the question. I see what you're saying, and I see the parcel behind it, but it is not, we don't have the authority to address it regardless. We have to go based on what it is.
So, in doing so, the planning commission, or you just said the engineering?
Planning department or engineering department.
Engineering, and what recourse is that? I mean, just by them telling us how this rear yard setback is designed? I mean, you have to have a premise for why you have a rear yard setback.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think these questions are appropriate for this board, and if he wants to discuss it with either myself or Mr. Box after the meeting, we'd be happy to discuss it with him.
Thank you, Mr. Loya. And I understand your concerns. It is not a question that we can address. I know Mr. Box and Mr. Loya would be happy to talk to you about the appropriate avenues for discussing the ordinance.
Okay.
Can I ask a question just with regard to the denial, how that, I guess I'm just confused.
Again, we'll address that after.
For the matter of administrative, that's something you would talk to Mr. Box about. All right, with that, we will move on to item 8B, which is variance request for section 10.0311EF2 and 10.0356A2. This is for permanent parcel 0821378023. And I don't think I will get this name correct, so my apologies in advance, but I'm going to give it a try. Mileva Banyak, maybe? Yeah, I should have pronounced it phonetically instead of trying to go fancy there. My apologies. With that, the parcel is located on the north side of 22 Mile Road, east of Romeo Plank. And I would pass it back to Mr. Box to give us the description of this variance request.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very much like the previous request, this is for a covered patio, and they are seeking a variance from the rear yard setback. And the previous one was 12 and a half feet. This one is 13 and a half feet, so a little bit of a smaller variance they're seeking. The difference here being this pavilion is already in place. It was built without permit and was found by the building inspectors and brought it to the attention of staff, and they were asked to seek a variance for this structure. So again, they're looking for a variance to allow them to go 13 and a half feet from the rear yard instead of the required 20 feet for both the patio and the covered gazebo, which is why you see the two different numbers again in the request. And the gazebo does meet the side yard setback. It does not meet the rear yard setback. There's an image here of the patio as it exists today. There is a 7-foot utility easement in the rear yard of the property. Again, it doesn't come into play here because it's not part of the setback area anyways, or excuse me, it is part of the setback area that they wouldn't be allowed to be building in there anyways. The assessing department had no objections. Engineering, again, noted that the rear yard easement does not come into effect. However, they found that there were no engineering-related concerns. Fire had no objections. Planning, again, found that there's no impact by the easement in the rear yard. And we would defer to the applicant to provide additional practical difficulty, and Public Works did note that there's some trees planted near the gazebo, and they wanted to confirm that those would not shed water onto neighboring properties. So that being said, we would again defer to the applicant to identify the practical difficulty.
All right, any questions for Mr. Box on this request? Hearing none, I believe the applicants are in the audience, and if you could come forth to the microphone over there and state your name and address for the record and give any comments you might have.
Hello, my name is Maleva Banjak, and the address is 49293 Flint Court. And this is my husband, George, who is also here to speak regarding the structure. Which part you wanted me to discuss about the practical difficulties as far as?
So for us, and as I mentioned to the last applicant, our job is to try to understand what the practical difficulty is, what makes it so that this structure would be built contrary to the ordinance in a way where because of something different about the property or the usage. One thing I would mention, and I'd ask for confirmation for this from Mr. Box and Mr. Loya, is that our job is not to penalize because a permit hadn't been pulled or to approve because the structure is already built. So we look at it as if the structure hadn't been built. Someone else may have an issue with the permit not being there. That's also not our responsibility. So we look at it strictly from the perspective of, is this something that meets the standard regardless of whether it was built or not? So sometimes when people come with a permit that hadn't been pulled, that's a concern they have and they bring it up. It may be a concern elsewhere. It's not pertinent for us. What we're looking for is to see whether the standard that we have for a variance is met. So that's principally what we're interested in hearing from you. But anything else that you feel is pertinent, feel free. It is your opportunity to state your case.
Okay, so we were looking to build a safe place for our son who has special needs and something that would be adjacent to the home, so it would be close, it would be easy access. You could keep an eye on him. He has some sensory issues. He doesn't get to go outside as much because of those instances. So his doctor that helps treat him also suggested a covered space for him outside. That way he could have the outside exposure just like any neurotypical kid without having to miss out on that. There were some things in place before we became owners of this home. So like those trees were there before. There's like a slab of concrete there that was there before us. The patio was there. There was a pool. So we're kind of limited where we could put the space, but also it'd be a space that's enough room for him to move around without being affected by things that would cause issues to him and have sensory effects that are just throw everything off for him. It's a little hard to explain, but I want to protect his privacy, my son, without exposing too much about his health. But we really want him to have a normal life as much as possible, be able to go outside, enjoy the outdoors without being affected by things outside that can, where it's just not gonna be a good experience. So, but it would also be a safe space too. He's close to the home. He'd have easy access in and out of the home too. So we were just trying to find a way to provide him a safe space outdoors.
And then if I might, and there might be other questions as well, but granted that it is built, so we're speaking about it as if it isn't built, so I understand there is maybe some oddity there, but did you look at other areas of the parcel that potentially could fit it? And I think you sort of spoke to this, but can you detail why obviously there is buildable space relative to the parcel that this is not in?
As you can see in the picture, like our lot is not really a normal sized lot, just like the shape and the dimension of it. So there really was nowhere else but that spot there that would be closest to the home where a gazebo that's covered could be built.
All right, thank you very much. Did you, before I bring it back to the board, I already started asking questions. Did you have anything else you wanted to bring up before I ask the board if they have any questions for you?
I think that's it, unless you have other questions for me.
Okay. anyone on the board have any questions for the petitioner? All right, hearing none, and without objection, I'm going to open it up to the public. If anyone on the public, obviously in the last petition or our last applicant, we had the other applicant in the audience, same thing here. If you have anything you wish to say on this petition, please feel free to come forward and say it. Hearing none and seeing none, without objection, I'm going to close the public comments and bring it back to the board for any further questions, comments, or motions.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I just wanted to remind everyone, there were a few emails that were sent your way. There was an email from a neighboring resident who weighed in on this variance request, as well as a letter from the condo association or homeowners association.
Very good, Mr. Box, and I probably should mention those for the record. I believe the summary from the neighborhood association, and maybe you said this and I already missed what you were saying, but I believe the summary from the neighborhood association was that they had determined that the structure was non-conforming to their bylaws separately,
That's correct.
which does not govern our decision, but it is informational.
Correct.
Okay. I don't know that I have seen the additional letter from any of the neighbors. Is it possible for you to summarize what was said in that?
I believe it was just one or two sentences stating that they were in opposition to this variance, and I believe it was one of the homes that were directly in the rear of this.
Okay. Understood.
Do we have a name for the record, Josh? Is there any way
Yeah,
we
we
can
probably should have a name.
give you an address?
I don't have it in front of me, but I will, give me a second, I see if I can pull it up in my email here.
Okay. Any questions from the board? While we're waiting for Mr. Box to see if he has an address.
I have one question.
Go ahead, Mr. DeBrey.
Underneath this gazebo, you said there's a concrete slab under there?
Right, that was there before we.
And
became
that
owners.
concrete slab was there, you just built this over top of it?
Right, because then eventually,
Eventually, we're gonna break it out and take it out and make it concrete all around the size of the gazebo.
All right, any other questions?
I do have the name and address, so in fact, it's one sentence, I'll just read it. To the zoning board, my vote for keeping the gazebo at 49293 Flint Court is no. The name is Karen Weiss, 49388 Yale Drive.
Okay. Understood and noted for the record. Also, of course, noted that it is a note and not a vote. All right. Mr. Aloy, do you have any comments on this at all?
No, and I want to clarify for the record, and I think there's confusion sometimes by applicants, and I think we had that in the last one. The issue is practical difficulty with compliance with the ordinance. So basically, they have to show that they have why there is a practical difficulty in complying with the ordinance and the setback. And many times applicants come up here and they do have sympathetic stories because of personal reasons. But this board's focus is to determine whether there is a practical difficulty for them to comply with the ordinance, okay? And a lot of times, compliance with the ordinance gets left out of the practical difficulty sentence, and so many times applicants come up here and explain their personal hardships, but not necessarily why they cannot comply with the ordinance.
could I mention one thing?
Yes.
Can I answer to that?
Yes.
Okay, without not knowing that laws and bylaws and stuff, we start building it. The inspector came, we poured the concrete and put the poles, and we start building it. The inspector came and said, you need a permit. I came to the city, I said, should I stop or should I continue? He didn't say yes or no, either or. I applied, and it took them 6 months back and forth to get a permit by the time we were done. So it's too much money spent in it to set back. I mean, I already spent $36,000 in it to tear it down. I already hired a contractor, and architect, and if it doesn't go through, I'm gonna attach it to the house in order to pass it.
And just for the record, sir, I think you might have mentioned, are you Mr. Banjak?
No,
Goichi.
I have my
Sorry,
maiden
George
name.
Goichi, I
My
apologize.
apologies. Could you give your name and address for the record?
My name is George Goichi, 49293 Flint Court.
And I hear what you were saying. I will mention, similarly to what I said at the beginning, our job is not to penalize you for
I get it.
not pulling a building
I
permit.
understand.
And generally speaking, we don't look at it in either direction. Obviously, it is there. We can see that the structure is there. But part of the purpose for that is that if we took the building permit into account, then that could be potentially a reason for denying it right there, and that's not, again, it's not pertinent to what we're deciding. I hear what you're saying and I understand it, but understand what our criteria are as well. Ms. Banjan, you had something else
Yeah, I just
as
wanted to
well.
mention, so for practical difficulty, I would think the way our property is shaped, that's a practical difficulty. In my mind, we're limited where this could be built, with it being close to the home. And we wouldn't be allowed to build it in any other areas of the property also, from how I understood it.
And I understand that as well. I will give my comment, and this is sort of my comment to the board. If we look at the parcel, it is an unusually spaced parcel, but if you looked at it outside of the house, there are places to put that. Now, granted, there is a pool in one of those locations. However, there is a limited number, with every parcel, as the other applicant was noting, there is a limited amount of buildable space in it. And there is buildable space within that parcel, and it's currently being used with a pool and with a patio. And now, I'm not saying how the board is going to vote, but I understand what you're saying, and I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just telling you what our perspective would be on that, or how I react to it. So, any other comments, questions, or motions, or comments from the petitioner? I know Mr. Aloya mentioned in there. I don't want to cut that off. If you had something else you had to say. Anyone?
I would make a motion to deny this the variance, section 10.0356 A2 and section 10.0311 EF2, based on the absence of a practical difficulty.
All right, that is a motion by Mr. DeBruin. Is there support?
I will support that.
Supported by Mr. Piper. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing no discussion on the motion, Mr. DeBruin, please call the roll.
David DeCosta,
Yes.
Robert DeBruin, yes. David Piper,
Yes.
Jim Gamikia,
Yes.
Aaron Tuckfield.
Yes. That motion passed, and that variance is denied. We appreciate you coming in. We're sorry to everyone for not necessarily getting what they're hoping for tonight, and we appreciate you coming in.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that moves us on to item 9, which is public comments. This time, any person can speak for up to 4 minutes on any subject. If you do wish to speak, please come forward to the microphone and state your name and address for the record. Hearing none, I will move on to item 10, which is ZBA member comments. Any comments from the board this evening?
Mr. Chairman, I do have something, actually.
Piper, go ahead.
I don't know if you're familiar with the Wotolski family. They're longtime residents of the township. Recently, Mrs. Wotolski passed away, actually just yesterday. She used to be the dispatcher for the fire department. Mr. Wotolski is a longtime member of the Historical Commission, which I am a part of, so I'd like to offer my condolence publicly to the family on their loss. And I'll add to that, since I mentioned about the Historical Commission, I'd also like to thank Supervisor Viviano. I noticed that the original Township Hall is at least in the beginning stages of being moved. It's good to know that there is some progress being made. We've kind of been in the dark on the Historical Commission up to now, so it's good to know that there's a possibility that it may one day happen. So, and last but not least, we had our bottle and can drive on part of the Friends of Macomb Township. We had it on April 23rd. we are giving away this year 10 $1,000 scholarships to Macomb Township residents. The deadline for applying has passed, but the judging is still going on. We have 5 different judges. We'll be giving those scholarships away in June. We do those bottle and can drives to raise money for those scholarships and also for Glenn Peters School for handicapped kids. So I thank people that came out for that. It was a very successful drive. We are going to be doing it normally on the 4th Sunday all summer long until fall, with the exception of May, because the 4th Sunday in May is Memorial Weekend. So we're gonna be doing it on the 21st in May only. It'll be the 3rd Sunday. So if anyone has any bottles and cans they wanna donate, we do it right in the parking lot of Glenn Peters School on Heidenreich, just south of 21 Mile. And we're there from 11 to 2, and happy to take the donations.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Piper. And for those who don't know, Mr. Piper has spent many hours, as I have heard, at the bottle can receptacle, depositing all those bottles to make sure that those donations can be realized. And I know, I've heard from multiple of your fellow board members who are both in some amount of awe and thankfulness that you deposit them. So,
I took back about $1,100 worth of this bottle and can drive myself
Holy cow.
in a day and a half.
a lot of bottles, a lot of bottles. All right, anyone else?
Yes, I would like to apologize for missing the last meeting. I completely zoned out. I want to apologize to the other board members, Mr. Box and your staff, and Mr. Earl and his staff. That was a complete zone out. I've got the next 2 years' meetings in my phone right now, even if we don't have them. So scheduling is a big deal in our world, and I dropped the ball on that one, and I apologize to everyone.
I appreciate it, Mr. DeBruin. I don't want to minimize the apology or the fact that we want to say that to the board, but I think everybody also understands, at least I know I understand. I've certainly been late, and it's not good to be late, but particularly if it's not routine, we appreciate you and understand things happen. So, any other questions? Any other comments? I actually did have one. I just want to mention, welcome Jim. This is his first,
Thank you.
first official meeting. We're glad to have you. I think you've been in the audience at least once.
Yes,
And so it's good to have you on board and good to have you in the meeting tonight.
thank you.
So, with that, Mr. Box, I think you're the next item. Do you have any comments for us this evening?
No comments this evening.
All right, and I think since our bylaws are now approved, Mr. Loya, with you on the agenda, not that I wouldn't do it anyway, but do you have anything for us this evening?
No, none at all. I appreciate that the bylaw's getting done. I think it was nice to get that out of the way, and I hope everyone enjoyed the training last month, and
I know I enjoyed it. I think it was very helpful, and hopefully we live up to the challenge of what you guys were hoping to have us do.
I think you will. I think you have.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Lawyer, will we be getting a clean copy of those?
Oh, that's right. You did ask for that. I will provide that to you.
That would be good to have.
Thank you.
And we should obviously make sure that Melissa and Paul, yes, thank you. Paul get a copy as well. All right, if there's no other comments, I will entertain a motion for adjournment at 7:31.
I will make that motion.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Piper, supported by Mr. See, I said it. My brain's Gamikia. See, still doing it. Motion by Mr. Piper, seconded by Mr. Gamikia. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by saying nay. That motion carries, and at 7:31 we stand adjourned. Man, I got all the way through the meeting.
So close.
Check out these little things you made. Motions in there.
Nice.
Link track it.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're denied because you didn't show practical difficulty. You said that there's an easement back here. Your structure is outside the easement.
Generally speaking,
It's not the easement, it's the setback. You had to show that you couldn't comply with the setback, which is 20 feet. So you could have built a square structure, which is what they're hinting at in the picture. She showed a square structure. But you asked for an outstream structure here, which was viewed as more of a luxury than a hardship.
I actually don't
So,
know if it is.
again, you have to show why you can't comply with the 20 feet. The easement has nothing to do with it. The easement's within the 20 feet. So you said the easement affected it, but you didn't explain how. So when your easement is within the setback, the easement has no effect on the practical difficulty at all. And that's what they were trying to ask you, and they never got an answer.
The person who didn't